Right. Well, let's get into it. So yes, welcome again. My name is Andrew. And as we go, feel free to put in questions or in the chat or in the Q&A section of Zoom. And we'll, some of them we might address in the middle, but most of them we'll address at the end. And hopefully we'll cover a lot of them along the way. So just to say what we're here for, we are going to talk about a number of different competitions, and they range from the beginner competitions suitable for all ages, all the way up through pretty much the hardest one, the Olympiad style competitions, including USACO, as well as other countries' competitions along those lines. And we'll start with an overview of everything, and then we'll go in depth on each individual one, on several different ones at least. So I wanted to start with our overall progression chart, our crazy diagram of how our course progression works. The sort of diagonal series of courses going up the middle here that is filled in with the colors takes us from our fundamentals classes up through our CS02B class, which is a college level class. And that's our core series of classes. So any of you who are Katie Byte students already, you probably know where you are along these lines, and you can get a sense with this chart and other sort of things like this on our website about where your student might be lining up. In terms of the contests we're going to talk about, you can see that USACO is over here in the college level category. A lot of students take this right after CS01B class or possibly after CS02A class. Overall difficulty is probably a little bit harder than advanced placement work. They're sort of slightly different styles of difficulty, but it is definitely a very hard contest. And other Olympiad style national competitions are in that same category of difficulty. Now, ACSL is one of the other very popular contests. That's not on this chart. That's because it really could, depending on what division of the competition you're in, could cover anywhere from elementary school children all the way up through high school work. So it's a little bit more broad and accessible. And then this seminar is really our first time really talking a lot about another contest we've signed up and sort of gotten our students registered for, which is the Beaver Computing Competition. That's a Canadian competition, and that's intended for younger students. So probably at the pre-high school level, approximately, that would be fitting those students, although possibly if you're a student without too much experience, even a high school student might be able to participate in that. So we'll take a look now at the contest specific details, but definitely let us know if you have questions about where you are in your progression and how do the contests fit into your students' work and your students' plan. So we'll start with the all ages competitions, meaning the ones that we wouldn't say are, oh, you have to, have taken the AP exam or be at that very advanced level. And this is, I think, sometimes overlooked, this sort of age range or getting started early, but it really is valuable both for building excitement about like solving this kind of problems in computer science and sort of building those thinking skills that are useful at later levels. You definitely can be recognized for your good work at these levels. And yeah, just overall training on the skills for this. So both the enthusiasm and the skills you get at these lower level competitions, once that at least you could start early on, they really do help with the later stuff, and as well as your just overall classes. So ACSL is the American Computer Science League, and this is what I participated in when I was in school way back when. And that's accessible for middle school students through high school in terms of the programming component. And then, in the last, I think 10 years or so, they have added even an elementary division, which has short answer questions that are accessible to very young students. The BCC stands for Beaver Computing Competition. Again, that's a Canadian competition. And that's one we've gotten involved with a bit more recently, but we're always on the lookout for good quality competitions that younger students can do, because I think sometimes younger students feel excluded from this whole competition environment because so many of them are aimed at very experienced students with a high level of difficulty. So you can see the breakdown of some of these things. One thing to note is that ACSL, as well as USACO, is 4 times per year, and you really should plan to participate all 4 times. You're really just doing yourself a disservice if you don't participate in them all. So both ACSL and BCC have short answer components to them. BCC is multiple choice. ACSL is sort of writing down an answer, but the kind of work you do is similar. They're short problems. You sort of might make some notes or figure some things out and then sort of determine what the answer is from there. ACSL also has a programming component to it, but it's a lot less stressful than some of the higher difficulty competitions where you have to do it in a time period. You basically have the whole weekend to do the programming, and that task, the programming task, does not apply to elementary division. ACSL does have 4 divisions that you essentially can choose what division you participate in, but mostly it'll be determined by your experience level and your grade level. So they have elementary division, which works a little bit differently than the others without the programming component, and then junior through senior division have both components to the contest and is sort of a progression. BCC basically breaks down by grade level, and you can participate even as a younger student, but obviously, it's intended for grades 5 through 6 to get started. So if you're in 3rd grade, you just want to make sure that you're ready for that additional level of challenge. ACSL does go all the way up through high school. Again, when I was in high school in my senior year, I did compete in ACSL. I did list that as one of my activities on my college application. So it's kind of a full academic career kind of thing you can stay involved with for a long time. Although, yeah, again, I think some of our students who are very advanced might find that it's on the easier side once you're in senior year. BCC only goes up to grade 10. It is intended as more introductory kind of thing. Now, there's some notes here about the fees. Overall, we cover a lot of the fees. So for Katie Byte students, if you want to participate on our school team, we'll cover that fee to have the team registered. If you do want to do the full prep class, that's a full class that there is tuition for. In terms of how the contests relate to the schools, they're all a little bit different, and that can be a little confusing. ACSL is sort of designed around a concept that there is a school team, but the actual participation is individual, except for there's an end-of-year contest called the All-Star Contest that you do participate as a group work. So it's an interesting mix of sort of a team environment, but a lot of the actual participation is individual during the 4 contests per year. And you would register through the team, and Katie Byte has several teams. The BCC is individual participation, but you still need to go through a school to do that. So we'll see a few more details about those, but that's kind of the breakdown of the sort of essential facts. Looking at the advanced competitions, all of these competitions that are listed here are aimed to prepare and qualify students for the International Olympiad in Informatics, which is basically the international, sort of the premier high school level international computer science contest. So USACO is the USA Computing Olympiad, CCC is the Canadian Computing Competition. One thing I'll throw out there with the CCC that I'm not going to write down or anything is that there is another phase to that one, which is called the Canadian Computing Olympiad, but that is limited to the top 20 people in the Canadian computing competition. So that's kind of the extra stage that they do to sort of prepare for the international competition. So in terms of general participation, it would be the CCC, which is a bit confusing because, where do you look for the word Olympiad? Each country does it a little differently. And then we have the AIO, which is the Australian Informatics Olympiad. As well. And then obviously there are other countries other than these 3, but we primarily focus on USACO. We are a US company, and also USACO probably has the most material. It's probably the most highly organized in terms of having different divisions, and overall just an easy one to get involved with, even if you're not in the United States. Now, CCC and Australian competition, we have registered for. So especially if you're in those countries, but also if you're just interested in participating, you can register to do that through Katie Byte, but they're definitely a little less popular, and probably mostly students who are in those countries are probably the main ones who are interested in that. But yeah, definitely let us know if you're interested in participating in any of them. So USACO is another one that's given 4 times per year. Unlike the ACSL, where it's a cumulative scoring system, where you essentially you don't have a good score at the end of the year unless you do all 4. USACO does individual contest weekends, 4 different times per year. So technically, you could sort of skip several and then do another one and get a really good score and be progressing. With that said, as I'm sure we all know, practice makes perfect, and you really, really should plan to do all four. There's just no reason not to do that. CCC and AIO only given once per year. AIO, we just sort of missed that in August, but you could, of course, be training to do that in next August, and then CCC would be in February, towards the end of the USACO season as well. The format for these are all fairly similar. They're all programming competitions where you have to create code that solves a problem. Again, all of these are sort of leading up towards this international competition, so they all have a fairly similar format. The timetable and the number of questions is a little different, but very similar. USACO actually is interesting because it has the most time with the fewest questions, and that's because a lot of these other national competitions like CCC and AIO, they have a wider spread of difficulty within whatever division you're participating in, whereas USACO has more separate divisions, so they tend to go a little bit more in depth within each division. So that's why those questions are designed to take longer, whereas someone who's very experienced in CCC junior division, they might get through the first 3 questions in only an hour or something like that, and then spend the rest of their time on the last 2 questions. So that it's just a little bit of a different feel for each of those. So USACO does have 4 divisions. They're labeled based on medals, bronze through gold, and then platinum would be the highest tier one. CCC and AIO both have 2 divisions. Australian one, interestingly, calls their first level division intermediate, which I think is mainly to emphasize that you would be expected to be a high school student. It's not really intended for a middle school student without very much experience. But they're both designed similarly, just sort of higher difficulty, and definitely requires experience for the second tier division. Roughly speaking, the senior divisions in each of those probably equivalent to gold and platinum division in USACO, but it's a little loose, and it can be a little subjective how that breaks down. All of these are recommended for high school students, essentially. Technically, there's no real restriction. If you're an experienced middle school student, you could participate in these, but you need to be prepared for the difficulty. And it's probably recommended, if you haven't really done any contest before, you might want to start with like ACSL competition, so you get a feel for that, because USACO or these others can be a real shock in the difficulty. So Australian one is kind of the newest one we participated in, and I think that one might have a grade level restriction, but it's similar to the others, intended for high school students. USACO is completely free to participate in and is organized solely through the USACO website. So technically, even though we want to help our students prepare for this competition, we really have no association with USACO. So you should register for yourself and on the website and be prepared for that. In our preparation classes, we do talk a bit about how to use the website, but in the end, it's something everyone should be able to do if they're at a level where they're going to be doing the competition. So let's see. So that's a great question about the AIO. That's actually something I should probably double check. Like I said, it's our newest competition, but I believe it would be like your most recent grade completed, but I would have to check a little bit. Obviously, the Australian school schedule might be a little bit different than the others, and I don't have enough experience to answer that with total confidence. So I would definitely say for any of these, check the website itself to get some more details, but we'll definitely follow up with you if you're interested in participating in that and want more info. But yeah, my assumption would be that, in your first 2 years of high school, you would participate in the intermediate, and then in your last 2 years, you would do the senior. So that's probably how it breaks down. So CCC and AIO, it is totally individual, kind of more so than ACSL, but you still have to register through a school. And so Katie Bite, for this year, for the first time with the AIO, we have registered so that we can offer that competition. So definitely let us know if you'd like to get into that one or either of those. So moving through the specifics now, this is sort of the division breakdown and sort of some of the recommended ages. I'm not going to read every single number here, but there's sort of a progression of difficulty. I guess the biggest thing to mention is that elementary division is intended for the youngest students, maybe through 6th grade, but certainly no further than that. And there's no programming component to that. So it's a lot like other, competitions aimed at younger age groups in that way. And then afterwards, it starts to be a little bit of both. It starts to have the programming component, but it is a little bit lower key than some of the really intense international Olympiad style competitions. So it's a good way to bridge that gap from sort of a little bit of experience all the way up through more experience. And it's something, I highly recommend if you enjoy computer science, if you're interested in it, sort of participate every year in ACSL. It's a good activity. Junior division only goes up through grade 9. So basically, once you're sort of further into high school, you would be intermediate or senior, depending on just your experience level. And I would say, you know, most of our students tend to be doing computer science from a fairly young age. So many of our students are doing, you know, senior division by 10th grade and almost certainly by 11th grade. But it depends on where you are. There's this correspondence here to your Katie Byte class level at about what difficulty you'd expect to match up to. We're not necessarily saying that an intermediate problem, for instance, is as easy as a CS01A, you know, quiz problem or something. But we are saying that if you've taken the CS01 level classes, you could certainly start working on intermediate. You might need to practice a lot, but you'd be ready to take on that challenge on. So again, I won't go through all the numbers, but we will be, you know, have the slides available later to look at, and feel free to ask any questions you like. Although if anything's really specific, we can just address it with each parent individually. So moving on to the progression, this is just a summary of sort of what the difficulty is like. As I mentioned, elementary is all short answer questions. I have another slide that will see what topics are on the short answer, but it's an interesting mix of computer science topics that aren't programming related directly. So it's a way of building thinking skills and logical skills and sort of being very precise with your work, that kind of skill set, which is helpful for programming, but also sort of the theoretical side of computer science as well. Junior division is the first time that you're doing programming problems, so that's probably going to be the biggest challenge for students starting at junior division. There are some additional short answer topics. In intermediate division, and whoops, there's a little word wrap problem there, sorry about that. But in intermediate division, there is the programming starts to probably be not as hard as just sort of getting all these specific short answer topics and understanding that. And then senior is just kind of harder topics. There's actually no new topics there, just overall higher difficulty. So there's kind of a new thing to get used to at each division, other than senior, where it's just like more practice, more challenge level. Okay, so we'll move on there. ACSL does have a general programming competition. A lot of this I've already said, so I'll go pretty quickly through this. I guess in terms of what style of programming you need to do, it is somewhat generalized skills. It's not as specific as, there's a lot of very specific strategies for problem solving, which we call algorithms, that you can learn a few algorithms for ACSL, but it's a little bit more generalized than that. It's more about, let me read this problem carefully. Let me make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Let me understand that, you know, if this thing happens and this other thing happens, then I have to do the problem in a different way than if one of them wasn't happening, that kind of thing. So just kind of thinking things through logically and carefully. So it's a little bit, again, a little bit more general than some of the other advanced ones. The short answer topics, I have a long list here, which I'm not expecting anyone to read all the way through, but there's a lot of very interesting theoretical computer science topics which aren't really covered in a lot of other classes. That's one of the things I think is great about ACSL, is that you get exposure to these topics that you might see in college or other formal computer science curricula that isn't covered as much if you're just learning to program. So it's kind of a nice look at the rest of the subject other than just making programs. So we're going to get to the question about how to register for ACSL classes. I actually think it's on the next slide, so that's a great question. Just to wrap up this slide, though, we have, I mentioned the 4 contests per year. There is an invitational contest at the end of the year for individual students who have done very well. And then, assuming the pandemic is not a problem, which obviously it has been a little bit, but you know, we're trying to return to normalcy, there is also traditionally an all-star contest where teams of students get invited to go to like a college campus and participate as a team against others in their division. So that's something we would like to get to, but you know, our ACSL program is relatively new. And so we would hope that we'll get there this year, but it depends on how many people are participating and how consistently they make sure to do each contest and not miss any. So one last thing I'll say about ACSL is it's been fairly similar organization for many, many years, you know, like decades. So it's a nice stable one. You're not going to have any curveballs really that we would expect with ACSL. So it's a good reliable way to show your skills, unlike some of the others where there's a lot of variation in how hard it is and that kind of thing. So moving on to the dates, these are the dates. Basically, there's a fairly wide window of when you can participate in each contest. you know, back when everyone did this in school, it was sort of intended that a school would just do it on one day, but they've really opened this up. They know people have different schedules, and yeah, you're allowed to take it pretty much any time in this window. So basically November through mid-January would be the first contest. Basically January through February would be the second contest, and so on. I mean, progressing basically through May. So obviously highly recommended that you try to do this not on the last day available. On the other hand, obviously it's nice to be able to practice. And in terms of how our prep classes work, at some point in this window, we'll be sort of transitioning from the first contest topics into the second contest topics. So that's something to be aware of. So we had some questions already about how to register and like how the teams work. So first of all, any Katie Byte student can be on the team. If you've already prepared for the contest and you kind of know all the topics and you don't want to do the prep club, that's okay. You can still be on the ACSL team, and you know we'll cover that fee. If you're a non-Katie Byte student and you just want access to the contest, we do have to charge a fee for the sort of cost of materials and the organizational side, but you know it's pretty small amount. Now anyone on the Katie Byte team can sign up for our prep club. That actually starts this weekend, so please do that as soon as possible. With that said, we will continue to revisit all the different topics, you know, throughout that period up until sort of maybe December approximately. So if you miss the first class, it's not the end of the world, but it's definitely nice not to miss anything. There is a restriction on the preparation materials being shared with people outside of the school's team. So if you are participating at a different school, you do have to, you know, train with that team, unfortunately, due to the ACSL rules. Oh, and one other rule I should have mentioned is if your home school, if you go to a full-time high school that does have an ACSL team of their own, you do need to participate in that one. They still want to have that focus on your main school. So Katie Byte's team is intended for students who don't have access to that to be able to participate through us. The contest, since COVID started, it has been done individually at home. So it's all through a website called HackerRank, which also hosts a bunch of other problems that are, you know, various kinds of contest problems and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's all, you know, there's a tutorial on the website, and we'll talk more about that if you're signed up, and make sure you can do that. But you do have to register through the school to have access to it. You are allowed to do the team if you can't make the prep class or have already prepared for it. And there you can have access to the study materials. Again, there's a fee for those materials, but you could do that if you're not going to do the prep club. And then there is a certificate as well that, you know, for students who do really well. So it's a great way to show your skills without having quite as high level difficulty as the others. We do have a form link here that everyone can will have access to after the seminar. Yeah.
So I want to add on to that. For all the participants, we will send out the recording and the slides, and also together with the registration link. So if you need some time to decide which division you want to join, don't worry, you can do that later on.
Yeah. And I guess just to wrap up the ACSL, I do think this is it's a very popular contest, but it's still overlooked by some people. Some people hear about something like USACO and they think, I want to just focus on that. It's important to remember that there is a progression, just like in any subject, and it's good to have multiple things you're participating in. You know, in terms of how many weekends you're doing this, it's only 4 per year for each of the competitions. So I highly recommend this for pretty much everybody. There's really no reason not to do this if you're a Katie Byte student already, to at least give it a shot. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the Beaver Computing Challenge. This is a pretty new one for us, new this year, but it is very similar to a lot of other contests aimed for younger students. It is organized by the same, I think it's Waterloo University that runs the Canadian computing competition. So, you know, they kind of run a bunch of these, and it's essentially the national computing competition for younger students in Canada. So, you know, we look at various ones of these. We have offered the Beaver Challenge before, which is organized by European institutions. We have a Katie Byte Challenge quiz in our fundamentals classes. That's just kind of a fun way to practice some logical thinking without always needing to be making a program at all times, because there's other elements of logic outside of just putting a program together. So this is along those lines as well. There's no programming knowledge required. So even if you're a total beginner, you can get started on this. this, certainly it can be challenging. So if you're brand new to all this kind of thinking, you might not do well on the very first try, but it's a great thing to learn about and try to get better at. And there are practice materials on the website and things like that. So there are some certificates of distinction here, but it's not necessary. It's not something you would probably put on a college application just because the level it's aimed at. It's more for developing knowledge and having fun solving computer science puzzles and getting you into that thinking mindset that helps you prepare for other things. So you can sign up for that if you're interested with another sign up form. So let us know about that if you want. Here's a sample problem just to get a sense of sort of what is this non-programming kind of thinking that you might do at the sort of younger student level. I think probably all of us could probably figure out how to do this, but it's a little bit of abstract reasoning here of connecting the idea of movement along a path to the using numbers to describe that movement. So if our starting point is the S, we would want to move to the right twice if we're following this path that's shown in this diagram. So how do we express that? Well, our direction diagram says that would be 0 to indicate moving to the right. So we would say 0, 0 would be the first 2 numbers in that sequence. And then down 3 would be 6, 6, 6, which is a bad number, but anyway, it'll keep going. And then, we would continue along that way. Now, this is multiple choice. So students would have several options. And sometimes if you just kind of do a couple steps of the problem, you can sort of eliminate some options and find the answer a bit more quickly. With that said, a lot of the times the best way to do this is just solve it without even looking at the choices and just think about what the answer would be and then look for the choice that matches up to it. So this is probably on the easier side. There is several different grade levels of difficulty for this, but that's the kind of thinking we're doing, training even very young students on abstract thinking skills and how do you represent ideas and information in a way that a computer can understand, that kind of thing. So yeah, the link to the sample problems is on the website as well. So let's move on to USACO. I know this is something a lot of people are interested in. USACO also has 4 divisions. Unlike ACSL, there's no choice about what division to do. You have to qualify for each one. So bronze division is where everyone starts. This is something we'd recommend basically after our students have taken our AP level equivalent classes, which is our CSO1 level of classes. That's usually what you would want to do before practicing USACO. The algorithms here are fairly general for the first division, maybe sort of comparable to ACSL, intermediate and senior division. And then they get more and more specific as you get more advanced. You have to specifically train and learn specific algorithms, specific strategies for solving problems. It's not something that you can just sort of think really well and you'll figure it out in time. Certainly all these algorithms come from somewhere. So if someone is very, talented, they probably could figure out some of these on their own. But, there's a certain set of problems that sort of everyone in this competitive programming world would be training on. And that's what we would cover in our prep classes. And you also find information about that on other websites that, cover those things. So silver division is where we really start to get into a lot of very specific algorithms. Gold division is, harder than that, and also starts to bring in not only what's the sequence of events that I do and how do I use, the tools that I have in a programming language like Java, but actually let's build our own tools. Let's actually make something that doesn't already exist in Java and then do a sequence of steps to solve a problem using the tool that we built to set up for it. So that's sort of that extra level. And then platinum division, of course, is the hardest one. Often you're sort of developing your own algorithms, but probably being inspired by some of the ones that you learned at earlier divisions. This is the level of the International Olympiad. So many students, once they get to gold division and especially once they get to platinum division, say, you know what, I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. I might still try to participate for fun, but I'm not necessarily planning to have a huge amount of success at platinum. And that's totally fine. Even saying that you reach gold division or reach silver division is already an excellent thing to list on a college resume. So you can see that we have classes for bronze through gold division. We don't have a class for platinum. It's such a high level of difficulty and requires so much intense focus that's really best for independent study, finding an experienced mentor to help you train for that. One other thing you see in the classes here is for bronze and silver division, we have S classes, which stands for study group classes. We would recommend at this point that everyone plan to do the introductory class, unless you've already, looked at the algorithms on your own through some other course or that other training, and then also do the study group style class. What we mean by a study group class is we're not introducing the algorithms. We've already seen them. Everyone in that class is expected to have already seen them. And so we're just going to do lots of problems, pick some intermediate to very hard problems, but definitely not beginner level problems, and just work through them together. Just keep studying, keep practicing. So it's a little bit more loosely structured than the introductory classes, but it's definitely important to do that practice. I don't think anyone at this point would ever say, oh, if you spend 18 hours learning the essentials of USACO, you can just jump in and expect to have success. You certainly should try. You should participate. You should get a sense of what the contest is like. But at the level of difficulty that they're at this point, and it has risen over the years, you really need more practice than that. Now, some students might be very comfortable practicing on their own, or maybe they have a group of friends or other students at their school who they can practice with. And so, that's fine. We're not saying it's a requirement to take the study group classes, but for students who need that assistance in sort of guiding their practice routine, it's a good way to do it. We don't have that for Gold Division because there's frankly fewer students at Gold Division. Now, on the other hand, the style of that class is that the students are already so experienced with the competitions that even the introductory class is a little bit more in that study group style. So it's kind of a hybrid of both. So yeah, definitely not saying that there's less practice needed for Gold. It's just that based on the number of students and sort of the maturity of the students in that level, we don't have it set up quite the same way. CS90S would be taken after CS90. Yeah, the difficulty level of problems is definitely a lot harder. CS90 obviously starts with more introductory problems and sort of goes over the basics and the overall problem solving approach, whereas CS90S would just be, look, we know all the introductory stuff, we just want to do lots of hard problems. So if someone already has a fair amount of experience and maybe they're not sure which level is best for them, they can maybe do both and sort of decide which one to stick with. But yeah, most students would take that as a progression from the intro to the study group class. We don't call it A and B because it's not quite like our other core classes where, there's a specific schedule. The study group class is a bit more loosely organized, and students could even bring up a topic that maybe they want to ask questions about or do a problem about, and we would be able to do that. So it's just a little bit different style. That's why it's not called an A and a B class. So we'll move on to the progression. I think I kind of actually already talked about most of these. One thing that is written here, though, is I would say, I think back to when I was doing an interview as a college student for working at Microsoft, where I worked for a couple of years. And I remember some of the very specific problems they asked as interview questions. And I would say that they were probably easier than silver level USACO problems were. So this really is something that even professionals may not be able to do very well at without a lot of specific training. So that kind of gives you a bit of a picture. Now, obviously, some professionals maybe do a lot of algorithmic work where they do know a lot of these things, but at least for a college student and entry-level professional, it's pretty hard stuff. So the format, I kind of mentioned some of these. It is 4 hours for 3 tasks. So they're all fairly long tasks. You have to organize your time well and organize your problem solving approach well. And even then you may easily run out of time because they're all quite difficult to work through. Compared to like the earlier contests, these are all fairly high difficulty, and it has increased in difficulty over time. I mentioned the idea that it's independently scored each contest. So basically, if you don't do well on your December contest, don't worry about it. Move on, get ready for the January one. You might do really well there, and that can qualify you for the next division just fine. Everything is done through the USACO website, which is totally independent from KDByte. So unlike basically all the others where you have to like register through a school, this is all independent. So please make sure to do that. And again, I would generally say if your student isn't able to manage that kind of a little bit on their own, they may not be ready for sort of that maturity level of actually working on a USACO content on its own. I think there is a connection between being able to operate, a website like that and organize yourself and make sure you sign up for your profile and remember the dates of the contest and also your organization on the material. So certainly help your students if they are working on getting to that point. So I haven't talked very much about the other, international contests, the Australian one, the Canadian one, and there are, of course, others as well. They're all fairly similar because they're all aiming at this international Olympiad format. This overall style of contest is called an online judge style. And you can find actually plenty of websites, even ones that aren't sort of the premier national team competition. There are lots of online judge sites. Now, the thing is with a lot of those, they're maybe hard to figure out what the difficulty is. There might be very hard problems intended more for college students to be participating in. So it's a little harder to figure out that landscape compared to the national competitions where it's a bit more sort of focused. But yeah, it's a very widely used format. So what that means is if you take our CS90 series of classes, which does focus on the USACO format, that's actually excellent preparation for the other contests as well. And that's what we would recommend for any of our students who are interested in any of those. And as I think I mentioned, even if you are primarily interested in like the Australian competition, for instance, you should do USACO as well. There's really no reason not to. It is free to register. It has a lot of the same skills. It has the similar format. There's just no real reason not to do it. So that's why we focus on USACO, just because it's very beneficial for pretty much everybody who's at that sort of experience level. So one thing that I will say is frustrating about USACO and probably the other national competitions as well is the difficulty can change. It changes over time from year to year. It even changes from contest to contest. So it can be a little hard to know how well you're doing. And I would just say, don't get discouraged, keep trying. If you've qualified for silver division, you know that you can train at that division. You just have to take your time to do that. This is not something that you're expected to get advancement right away. It's something that you're expected to have several attempts where you may not do well, you may do pretty well, but not well enough to get to the next division, and it takes time. So just be prepared for that. Be prepared to hear things like, well, if you look at a contest problem from 3 years ago, it's actually a lot easier than what the New Year's contests are likely to be. That's just the way it is. But they try to do this, so overall, it's creating a good progression up to that highest level. So frankly, I wish as a teacher and as someone who likes to have our students participate, I do wish it was a little bit more stable and predictable. But the fact is, it's meant to be a challenge. So I think if you think about ACSL and USACO as ways to participate, I think you get kind of the best of both worlds between the two of them. Let's see. So the dates are not usually announced until November, but I can tell you that it's pretty predictable. So for instance, last year, December 17th through 20th was the first contest weekend. Now I mentioned that the contest is 4 hours long. So what does it mean that you have a weekend? Basically, you can pick any time during that weekend to participate. So, it's okay if you're on a trip or something, as long as, you'll be back from that trip on Monday and your student could participate on Monday. And it is a Friday through Monday schedule. So you have a fair amount of flexibility on exactly when students can participate. But yeah, it's nice to plan ahead for this. So even though they haven't officially announced it, given that last year, December was 17th through the 20th, that was the weekend. This year, the equivalent Friday through Monday would be the 16th through 19th. So I would give it 90% chance that that's the weekend this year, unless, there's some weird thing where they sort of shift it. Also, you should note that there are 6 dates mentioned here, but the last 2 dates are only for the absolute top tier, like top 16 people in the country to do the national team training camp and then the international competition. So these top 4 are the ones you want to focus on. The 4th one is labeled the US Open, but even though traditionally that's maybe a little bit harder than the others, it's still the exact same format. So just like all the others, you should plan to do it to, give yourself as many tries as you can to advance. So I'll go to the next slide in a second, but one thing I did want to clarify, this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, is these divisions are named after medals. And a lot of people think of it as an award that you get, but that's not really how it works. It might have been easier if they labeled them, junior through senior and then super senior or something like that. Everybody starts in bronze division. So you wouldn't really say anything like, I got a bronze award in USACO. That doesn't really mean anything. You would say, I'm in bronze division, which actually doesn't say very much because everyone starts there. But if you say, I'm in silver division, or you could say, I was promoted to silver division, that's how you would describe your progress there. So that can be a little confusing because of the names they use. Okay, so just to summarize a few more recent changes KDByte has done, we are, adding the BCC contest as something for younger students to participate in, and we still have some of those challenges I mentioned that we offer in our classes, but this is a nice way to do something sort of independently of class time. We are adding this semester coverage of the other national competitions, so we'll look at least one problem as an example of those. But like I said, the overall picture is that they're actually pretty similar to USACO. So we'll stick with mostly USACO, but it should give people a bit more idea. So good question, Ken. Let me finish this slide and then I'll go back and clarify that. I may not have said that totally clearly. So I mentioned USACO changes in difficulty. In particular, if you look at like bronze and silver divisions between like 4 years ago up till now, it's definitely gotten a lot harder. So we're always making adjustments for that. And our current most recent adjustment would be the study group classes. We didn't used to recommend that everyone, for instance, needed to take 2 semesters of practice for bronze division, but we would probably recommend that now, or we would definitely recommend that now. So, keep that in mind. I know it's frustrating to hear, oh gosh, I have to do even more practice now, but we want to be well prepared. So that's what we would recommend at this point. Let me go back to the dates here. So the box here, the red box, all 4 of those are the same format and they're available for everyone to participate in. It's only the last 2 dates that aren't inside this red box. Those are the ones that are the sort of top tier people. I say top tier, I shouldn't be insulting. I don't think I could qualify for the national team, frankly. So everybody participating can do the first 4 contests and you should plan to do them all. It's only those last 2 that would be exclusive to 16 people only.
So the question was that if someone missed the December contest, they can still join the January one.
Yeah, absolutely. So ACSL is cumulative. So if you miss the first contest, you can participate in the others, but you would not really be likely to have the highest, a high score at the end of the year. USACO is totally independent with each contest. So even if you do have to miss one, you can do the others. But I wouldn't plan on it. I think I always worry when I say that people are going to be like, okay, I'll just do 2 or 3. And, you're just not giving yourself the best chance. But yeah, if you have to miss one, totally fine. Take the next one. And, that's just a good as chance to advance in January, February, March, etc. The US Open is basically the same format as the others. Traditionally, it's a little bit harder. Sometimes they do things like adding an extra hour and adding an extra problem to do. And then even if they don't do that, it might be a little bit harder. So the exact numbers of how many problems there are, how much time you have is slightly different sometimes with the US Open, just kind of as an end of year big finale, but the format itself is the same. It's still done through the website. It's still the same style of problem. It's still the same basic criteria for advancement. So yeah, it's pretty much the same. You should treat it the same, although you should be on the lookout before you click start my timer. You should look out for, what is the timer, because that one is the one most likely to be different. Yeah. Let's see, I was going to say something else about advancement. So I mentioned you have to qualify for the next division. There's basically a cutoff score. It's sort of graded on a curve. So if everyone is doing really well in bronze division in some contest, the cutoff score is probably higher. If it was a very difficult one, the cutoff score is probably lower. But basically about a week or so after the contest closes, they will announce what the cutoff score was, and you can log into your account on the website and see if you're in the next division. Yep, that's it. I guess one thing I could mention is if you get a perfect in your current division, you immediately qualify for the next division. But that's, for one thing, that's very unlikely because, people tend to work up to it. So it's not that common to get a perfect. And then secondly, if you were focusing on training for your current division, you might not really be very well prepared for the next one. So I would say, yeah, definitely give it a shot, but you'll see there is a pretty distinct difficulty jump with each division we go through. So there were a couple questions from registration that I'll get to, and then we'll see if there's any other questions as well. I talked about how to choose a contest a little bit by talking about the requirements. So we had some lists of sort of what KDByte classes you'd be equivalent to. There are some grade level requirements, although frankly, I think most KDByte students would mainly focus on just their overall experience level. So the gist is, if you're sort of focused on fundamentals classes, you could do the earlier ACSL divisions possibly. If you've just done block-based programming classes, you would probably want to do the non-programming competitions, so that'd be the BCC and the ACSL Elementary. Once you start doing basic, programming tasks in Fund 3 and CSO0, you could think about junior division, although CSO1 is probably a safer bet for that. And then for the highest level ones, you can start getting into it after the AP level classes. Some students want to really rush into it, especially if they're already high school students and they don't want to miss a chance to get there. Just know it will be harder if you kind of try to get into it ahead of schedule. When should you start? I think hopefully we've shown you that there's really something to do at all age levels, but it does depend on your progression. If you're sort of at that AP level, you can do the USACO, whereas the other two, you can do those at any level, pretty much. It just depends what division you're doing. And then some people have questions about coding languages. The quick answer to that is all the ones that we mentioned would be Java would be fine, and that's what our core curriculum covers. And C++ is also a common popular one, but something like the USACO, for instance, is specifically designed so that every problem they give is equally solvable in Java and C++ using the same basic, contest strategy. So there would be a few differences in what are the names of the tools within the language that you'd want to use, but they're fairly equivalent to each other. So our courses are taught in Java, but I think, if you're coming from a different language, you'd realize it's actually not that hard, especially if it's something like C++, you'd be able to do just fine in our classes. If you've learned something like Python, but you don't know Java very well, that is something you can use on ACSL and USACO, but it's not really recommended, especially at the higher levels of USACO where the efficiency of your program is a huge criteria. You really should use something that is a bit more like Java or C++. I won't get into the technical reasons, but basically they're a little bit more predictable and a little faster sometimes than Python is. And then so for the preparation, I mentioned our prep classes for each of these. We do have a prep class for ACSL as well as USACO. In addition, there are plenty of resources on the websites you can look at. With ACSL, you can get study materials that you can study on your own. As I mentioned, there's kind of a whole community of this online judge style of contest problems. So there is a USACO kind of wiki that's maintained by students who are, just interested in that. So that's a great place to look for an overview of different topics and that kind of thing. And then, as I mentioned, practicing with a friend is good, but our classes are here so that everyone has an opportunity, regardless of who else is around. So yeah, Python and Java could be used, but Java is definitely recommended. Bronze is, yeah, if you were to pick one division where Python is probably okay, Bronze division would be it, but I would still recommend, and any student who is working on Bronze, you may as well try to pick up Java along the way, because you're really going to want to use that at higher levels anyway. So let's see, do students go for a higher level of USACO at the same competition season? It's definitely possible, especially if you get promoted to silver division in December. You certainly have plenty of time to train a little bit more on silver before by the January contest. I would say the rule of thumb is probably at this point that it might take about a year of sort of training for each new division. And then that could be compressed a little bit if you do it really intensively or you do summer classes. So, but yeah, it's definitely possible. I would say, get to silver division for the first time in December and then get to gold division in January. That's fairly unlikely. I think most students find that they need more practice than that. With that said, if you have taken CS90 and 90S and you feel like you have a pretty good handle on bronze division, it is okay to take CS91 after that, and you might find that you could advance pretty rapidly. So, depends on how much practice you're doing and just how well you're clicking with that style of work. So I think that was all the main stuff. Certainly at this point, feel free to submit any more questions to the Q&A or to the chat. We have some notes here about the sign up. I guess we actually have the old early bird special note, which unfortunately has passed, but definitely think about the ACSL sign up for this weekend, basically, or hopefully soon after that, if you'd like to take the ACSL prep class. Our USACO classes do run on a full semester schedule, so they are already running. With that said, there's some flexibility in there in terms of when you jump into it. I think if you're a total beginner, it's probably pretty hard to jump in the middle. Whereas, if you have some experience and you're just trying to have a bit more structure to it, it's possible to do some mid-season sign up. And then if you are a total beginner and you feel like you missed the opportunity to sign up for our current classes, it's possible we could offer some mid-season classes and that kind of thing. USACO is pretty tough work. It is hard to find tutors for like one-on-one tutoring for USACO work. But again, if there's enough demand, we might be able to do some kind of middle semester training class for a level if there's a lot of people interested in that. So just let us know about that. I guess, Wendy, are you going to put up our exit poll now, or can we do that?
I think we can take some more questions and then we'll do the exit poll.
Okay, but basically, yeah, in the exit poll, let us know if you want some follow-up to talk about course options, or if you're not sure about them. Our contact info is here, but it's also right at the bottom of our front page. So you can always find that info, and we're always happy to talk with you if you reach out with any questions. We have the phone number and email here, but also if you like using WeChat, that info is at the bottom of the page as well. Yeah, so thanks everybody. Let's see. So yeah, the prep classes for ACSL are interesting because, like I said, there's some content there that you really don't see in any other levels. So, or in any other like classes, typically things like graph theory or regular expressions and things like that. We actually do cover regular expressions and graph theory in our advanced classes, but you see at a much earlier level in ACSL. So yeah, basically those classes have to cover the material. They will talk about the fundamentals of the topic. With that said, it is aimed at ACSL, and we do use those study materials as sort of the source of practice problems. So we wouldn't get into, really advanced graph theory algorithms and code them in an ACSL prep class, because we would do that in other classes. But we would definitely give the overview of the subject as well as the practice on those short answer topics. For the programming portion, ACSL prep class would definitely not be teaching you how to program. You should, have programming experience, although it could be as little as just like 1 or 2 semesters of experience if it's like junior division, for instance. So that would be, the programming portion would be more focused on let's tackle ACSL problems and not give as much general info, because students would be coming in with the general programming ability from other classes. Good question about the Katie by team. I appreciate you asking about that, and you're interested in the team's success. So the fact is, yes, the All-Star contest is based on the teams that have done well as a team grade. So if you look on the website, you can get a little bit more info. We don't need to go into all the details, but basically there's a 3-person team format and a 5-person team format. The problems are exactly the same. It's just a question of how many students are participating. So if Katie Byte thinks we have enough students to have a 5-person team, but then it turns out a lot of students are not really doing the contest, yes, that can bring down the team score, and it would make it less likely that the team is invited to the All-Star competition. With that said, you still do have your individual score, and students do get certificates and things like that for that. So I wouldn't stress out about it too much, but I would definitely say that if you want to be a good Katie Byte team member, it would be nice if you plan to participate on all of the contests, or at least I suppose if you do want to participate, but you really just don't think your students could stick with it very well, you could let us know that, and that might affect our decisions about how we register and would we sign up for the larger team size or the smaller one. So, but yeah, I appreciate you thinking about that, but it's mainly based on number of students, and there is a little flexibility. It doesn't have to be, for instance, the same students every contest round contributing to that team score. So if one student does really well in one weekend and another student does well on another weekend, but neither one did well on both, that actually still is fine for helping the team score. All right, Wendy's posted some links in the chat about the sign-up forms for the ones that basically the competitions you have to register for through our school. In addition, the AIO and the CCC, please get in touch with us. We don't have a sign-up form for those because those are maybe a little bit more limited interest, but yeah, just reach out to us if you're interested, and we'll talk through the details more with you. Are there any other questions? We've gone almost an hour now, so I'll probably wrap it up in a few more minutes, but happy to answer anything else.
Andrew, can you go back to the USACO contest dates?
Contest dates, yes.
Yes. So for example, if a student started bronze level in December and then got promoted to silver. So they might be able to do silver division questions in January and February or March, because it's highly unlikely that they will promote to gold in this contest season, right?
Yeah.
So
unfortunately, sorry, keep going.
So for the next year, when this student starts, they can start in silver division in December next year, right?
That's a really good point. Each year is not a reset, and each contest is not a reset. Once you're promoted with your USACO account on the website, it is permanent. You will never go back, even if you don't do well in your next contest or anything like that, or even if you skip a contest, there's no penalty for that. So progression is permanent, but that does mean it's intended to be done over multiple years. So as Wendy was pointing out with the dates themselves, you can see there's just not that much time between the December and the March contest. It's just 3 months essentially. So it's very difficult for most people to train on a totally new division. Like I said, though, maybe if you've been preparing for bronze division in spring and summer, and then you actually have taken CS91 class in the fall, you could probably give it a pretty good shot if you do get promoted in December. But at the same time, I wouldn't get down on yourself if you don't hit that goal. It is very challenging. And as much as classes and prep classes are useful for preparation, there's really no substitute for actually doing it. That's the only time you're really doing totally new problems that you just are not having any help on. And that's something that it takes a lot of practice to do. Feel like I was going to say one more thing, but no, I guess not. Yeah. And I guess to clarify the advancement, as Wendy said, if you get promoted to silver in December by doing well in bronze, you might find out you're promoted, the week after the December contest. You can immediately start trying January. Just understand it will be very difficult and you might not make very much progress until you've trained up a bit. All right.
Yeah, any more questions you can post in the Q&A or in the chat. If you don't have any questions, I'll launch an exit poll. There you can request if you have like individual questions you want to talk to us privately. You can select that you want to be contacted by an academic advisor. We will give you a call or reach out to you by email.
And I just want to thank everybody for coming. Hopefully we've given you some info. I think a lot of people come in maybe interested in one contest, and hopefully you might realize that there could even be multiple that you could be participating in, depending on where you are in your progression.
And also the recording and slides, and also the ACSL and BCC registration link to KTBI team, we will be sending out to the emails that you registered for this room meeting. And if for some reason you don't see that, again, just reach out to our contact info on our website.